Good evening, good evening, good evening, folks. I'm alive. Oh, welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We are going back to that horrible world known as the JRC. But before we do the usual disclaimers, I am going to do a rant piece on that separate series that I use rarely because I don't have any time to myself ever. Just as a warning. So be prepared for that. There's a whole lot of rants. I got like true comic book nerd rage. It's special. So be prepared for that, right? All right. The reason why I look exhausted is because I started out this morning with two different messages from my boss and his boss asking me to come in early. Well, folks, if it's not mandatory, I'm not doing it, especially not on my birthday week. Okay? This birthday week ends when the weekend ends. I'm going to enjoy myself. No overtime. All right, folks, let's get to the disclaimers. If you are unfamiliar with the Stop the Shocks campaign or with the Troubled Teen campaign, you're going to find all the pertinent links right there in the description box. Please, in particular, take note of the article written by NeuroClastic, a small non for profit started by autistics for autistics, wherein they interviewed and surveyed over 900 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's so called behavior modification program. The Judge Rotenberg Educational Center doesn't want you to read that article so much. They have indeed threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit if they did not remove it from the website. So hold on, folks. Itchy ear. Please read that article. Share it on all your social media. And allergies. Trigger warrant. We also got their public statement in regards to the defamation lawsuit threat, as well as a link to their GoFundMe. We are crowdfunding in case the JRC sees through with their threat. Folks, when we discuss things like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center and Agape Boarding School, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips of surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, folks, please go ahead, utilize those headphones, all right? Trigger warning 2. This channel is marked not for kids for a reason, folks. We do use profanity on occasion. Say hi to the meow, bye to the meow. On occasion, we do use profanity. We speak on dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and they are watching this, very obviously parental supervision is advised. So I'm going to revel in what little freaking wonderful logic that we've got from the one dissenting judge who tried to call these people on their bull. All right? So let's go ahead, read through it, enjoy it. It's going to be like far and few in between here. It states, this case is illustrative. The FDA conducted a years-long examination of whether to ban the use of electrical stimulation devices intended to treat for self-injurious and aggressive behaviors. Yes, we're rereading it. People who engage in those behaviors often suffer from intellectual or developmental disabilities, but not always. Here's the closed heart little secret when it comes to self-injurious behavior. If you look at it logically, there is quite a bit larger number of folks who do engage in some form of self-harm than most people realize. The reason why most people don't realize it is because people don't necessarily think of alcoholics or people who use drugs, for example, or people who are adrenaline junkies or people who do stupid crap. They don't necessarily see that society doesn't really see that as self-injurious behavior. But the fact of the matter is, it is though. The reasoning may be different. On a lot of occasions, they're actually the same, but there is a far larger group of people who actually do engage in some form of self-harm than these folks want you to think. But nobody wants to think outside of the neurotypical box. You could actually argue that those who do, like myself, willfully throw themselves headlong into alcoholism, especially after experiencing a trauma, a death, abuse, you could technically argue alcoholism as a form of self-harm. Now, there are individuals who do suffer from these illnesses like alcoholism that on the surface it doesn't really look like that, does it? But it's an addiction, Tiff. It's not really the same thing, but here's the thing, it is though. Okay? Not everyone who participates in some very dangerous self-injurious behavior is looking necessarily as a way to harm themselves. Uh, you get what I'm saying, right? There is a far larger amount of people on this planet that engage in self-injurious and dangerous behaviors than people inside the medical model are actually willing to admit. And the reason why is the forms, some of that dangerous self-injurious behavior is not considered so, is because they have been accepted, begrudgingly or not, by society as things that are normal, when in actuality they're not, and do just as much, if not in some cases more harm, than the types of self-injurious behavior that they're talking about here, which the JRC tortures people for. Okay? The reason why I bring this up is people need to start opening themselves up a little bit and step outside of the boxes that the medical model tries to paint us all in. Okay? If we want to get down to the bottom of things like self-injurious behavior, we have to be willing to accept that the forms of self-injurious behavior that society has accepted as normal are not actually so. Okay? Moving on. Rant over. Electrical stimulation devices deliver a powerful and painful electric shock to the wearer's skin in an effort to punish and thereby discourage self-injurious and aggressive behaviors when they manifest. Again, logic here isn't logicking. Because if you are a person who actively engages in self-injurious behavior and you're stuck in a hellhole like this, so you can't engage with the normal self-injurious behavior, particularly when they strap you up like you're Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lambs. So what's another way to engage in self-harm? By actively, willfully choosing to display the so-called trigger behaviors in order to that you may be able to self-harm by proxy. Of course, nobody wants to talk about that particular elephant in the room, but I have an interesting mind, folks. But you don't want up in here. It's a scary, demented place. That type of treatment has fallen into disuse over the past 3 decades for obvious reasons, because you can't stop violence against oneself by means of violence. It's illogical, all right, to say the least. Petitioner, the Judge Rotenberg Center, is the sole facility in the United States that still use the electrical stimulation devices to treat self-injurious or aggressive behavior in disabled persons. This is a fact. It's a fact, folks. If this device actually did what Matthew Israel and what these rest of these judges want to make you believe that it does, then it would still be widely used by the medical model. ABA, modern ABA, with all its horrific problems that are still prevalent throughout its basically overbloated corpse, as I like to think of it, glutting themselves on the pain and suffering of multitudes of autistics throughout the generations, trying to force us square pegs into a round hole. Even they draw the line at physical punishment in regards to correct the non-neurotypical behavior, which gets us nowhere. Okay? You cannot stop violence with more violence. Folks, we are seeing a war happen right now before our very eyes. Never in all the history of mankind. And I feel like I can speak to this with at least some level of authority because I've been studying ancient cultures, ancient myth, ancient medieval, Renaissance era, you name it, history. It's an hyper focused special interest of mine since I was 10 years old. And I can tell you, granted, this is an opinion, but I can tell you, you cannot stop violence, whether it's self injurious behavior or violence in general as society knows it as a whole, by means of violence. Violence begets more violence. In regards to these devices, when it stops the behaviors, yeah, what happens when you take the device off? Well, now she's worse than ever before because you took her off the device. No, jackass. They're worse because you've tortured them for years on end with impunity, with nobody being able to do a goddamn thing about it in spite of all of our efforts for over the last 3 decades. Eh? All right, we understand this. Yes, you can't use violence to cure violence. That's not how any of this works. But that's the whole premise and backbone in regards to aversive therapy. Okay? We're going to close on that. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few we do get do tend to get removed from time to time, folks. So please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit those comments. I do appreciate your time tonight. And as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. I will see you in a few minutes. Bye bye, everyone.